Willow Collins stood at the back of the small whitewashed church in Cottonwood Springs, Arizona Territory, 1885, clutching her bouquet with trembling hands as the wedding march began. The man waiting for her at the altar wasn't the one who held her heart. But in 3 minutes, she would become Mrs. Harold Pennington unless a miracle happened. The wooden doors of the church had been thrown open to combat the June heat, allowing a gentle breeze to filter through the crowded room. Willow's father, stern-faced and unforgiving, gripped her arm with unnecessary force as they prepared to walk down the aisle. "Remember our agreement," he whispered harshly. "This marriage will save our ranch and your mother's medical treatments. Pennington has agreed to pay for everything." Willow nodded mutely, her throat tight with unshed tears. Her white dress, though beautiful, felt like a prison uniform. She had spent the past month hoping for some escape, but time had run out. Harold Pennington, 20 years her senior and the wealthiest man in the territory, stood proudly at the altar, his expensive suit a stark contrast to the modest attire of the townsfolk who filled the pews. The organist played louder, signaling it was time. Willow took a deep breath and stepped forward with her father. The guests rose to their feet, admiring her lace gown and veil as she moved slowly down the aisle. Some women dabbed at their eyes, mistaking her anguish for bridal emotion. Through the blur of faces, Willow searched desperately for one in particular, the face of Samuel Blackburn, the cowboy who had stolen her heart last autumn. But he had left town months ago after their secret courtship had been discovered by her father, who had promptly forbidden their relationship and arranged this marriage to Pennington instead. As she reached the altar, Harold took her hand with a proprietary grip. His smile didn't reach his cold eyes as he nodded appreciatively at her father. The preacher began the ceremony, his voice echoing through the hushed church. "Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today." Willow felt light-headed as the words washed over her. The bouquet of desert wildflowers trembled in her hands. The preacher's voice seemed to come from far away as he continued with the ceremony. "If anyone can show just cause why this couple cannot lawfully be joined together in matrimony, let them speak now or forever hold their peace." The customary pause followed, filled only by the sound of a crying baby quickly hushed by its mother. Willow's heart sank as the silence stretched on. Then came the thunder of hoofbeats. The congregation turned as one toward the open doors. Framed in the bright sunlight stood a tall figure on horseback. Dust swirled around him as he dismounted in one fluid motion and strode into the church, spurs jingling with each determined step. "I object," came the deep, familiar voice that had haunted Willow's dreams for months. Gasps rippled through the church as Samuel Blackburn removed his hat, revealing tousled dark hair and fierce eyes fixed on Willow. His trail-worn clothes and unshaven face suggested he'd ridden hard to get there. "This woman belongs with me," he declared, his voice carrying to every corner of the church. "And I belong with her." Harold Pennington's face flushed crimson. "This is preposterous. Sheriff, remove this man at once." The town sheriff rose hesitantly from his pew but seemed reluctant to intervene. Willow's father stepped forward, his face contorted with fury. "You were warned to stay away, Blackburn. This wedding will proceed." Samuel didn't even glance at him. His eyes remained fixed on Willow, filled with both question and certainty. "Willow Collins, I've come back for you, just like I promised. I've staked a claim that will provide for us both. I'm asking you now, in front of everyone, will you choose a life of love over a life of obligation?" The church erupted in murmurs. Harold's hand tightened painfully around Willow's wrist. "You impudent ranch hand," Harold spat. "She's made her choice. Guards." 2 men moved from the front pew, Harold's personal guards, who normally protected his mining interests. But Willow had finally found her voice. "Wait!" The single word cut through the chaos like a knife. She gently pulled free from Harold's grip and took a step toward Samuel. "You came back." "I said I would," Samuel replied, his voice softening. "I promised you under that cottonwood tree that I'd return with enough to give you the life you deserve." Tears spilled down Willow's cheeks as memories flooded back stolen moments by the creek. Whispered promises under starlight. The plans they'd made before her father had threatened to let her mother die without medical care if she didn't marry Pennington. "Your mother's treatments have been paid for," Samuel said, as if reading her thoughts. "I spoke with Dr. Williams this morning. I've covered the past bills and the next 6 months. You're free to choose, Willow." Her father lunged forward. "That's impossible. You're a penniless cowboy." "Not anymore," Samuel replied calmly. "My claim in the Superstition Mountains panned out. I have the papers to prove it." Willow's heart soared as hope bloomed within her chest. She turned to Harold, whose face had hardened into a mask of contempt. "I'm sorry, Mr. Pennington," she said, her voice growing stronger with each word. "But I cannot marry you. Not when my heart belongs to another." Harold's eyes narrowed dangerously. "You'll regret this humiliation, girl. The only regret I'd have is spending my life with a man I don't love," Willow replied. She turned and walked toward Samuel, who stood waiting with his hand extended. The moment their fingers touched, a jolt of recognition passed between them, the connection they'd both felt from their first meeting. "Are you sure?" he whispered, his eyes searching hers. "I've never been more certain of anything," she answered. With that, Samuel swept her into his arms and carried her down the aisle while the wedding guests watched in stunned silence. Some looked scandalized, others amused, and a few, particularly the younger women, appeared openly delighted by the romantic spectacle. As they reached the church doors, a cheer erupted from the back pews, started by Samuel's fellow cowboys who had ridden into town with him. The celebratory whoops spread until half the church was applauding the escape of the reluctant bride. Outside, Samuel's horse stood waiting. He lifted Willow onto the saddle before mounting behind her. With one arm secure around her waist, he spurred the horse forward, and they galloped away from the church, leaving a cloud of dust and a stunned wedding party behind them. They rode hard until the church was far behind them, following the creek that wound through the valley. When they reached the massive cottonwood tree where they had first confessed their feelings, Samuel slowed the horse to a stop and helped Willow down. "I can't believe you came back for me," she said, still breathless from their escape. Samuel cupped her face in his calloused hands. "I would have moved heaven and earth to get back to you, Willow Collins. These past months without you have been torture. But how did you know today was the wedding? And how did you manage to pay for my mother's care?" Samuel led her to the shade of the cottonwood tree, its leaves rustling peacefully above them. "I never actually left the territory. I've been working my claim in secret, knowing your father would try to stop me if he discovered what I was doing. I kept tabs on you through Billy at the general store. When I heard the wedding date had been set, I knew I had to work faster." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small leather pouch, which he emptied into his palm. Willow gasped at the gleaming nuggets of gold. "This is just a fraction of what I found," he said, his eyes shining with pride. "Enough to secure our future and care for your mother properly." Willow touched the gold with trembling fingers. "All this time, I thought you'd abandoned me." Samuel's expression darkened. "I would never abandon you, Willow. Your father threatened to have me arrested or worse if I didn't leave town. But I couldn't go far, not when my heart remained here with you." She leaned against his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. "What happens now? My father won't forgive this easily. And Harold Pennington is a dangerous enemy to make." "We'll face whatever comes together," Samuel promised, stroking her hair. "I've purchased land near Silver Creek, far enough from Cottonwood Springs to give us a fresh start, but close enough to visit your mother." There's a small cabin already built, with room to expand as our family grows. Willow looked up at him, a blush coloring her cheeks at his implication. Our family. Samuel dropped to one knee, still holding her hands in his. Willow Collins, I've loved you since the moment I saw you tending those wildflowers behind your father's ranch. Will you marry me? Not because of obligation or arrangement, but because we choose each other every day for the rest of our lives. Tears of joy spilled down Willow's cheeks as she nodded. Yes, Samuel Blackburn. 1,000 times, yes. He sealed their promise with a tender kiss that quickly deepened, expressing all the longing and separation they had endured. When they finally pulled apart, both were breathless. We should go, Samuel said reluctantly. Your father will have men searching for us soon. As if confirming his words, they heard distant hoofbeats approaching from the direction of town. There's a wagon waiting at Tucker's Crossing, Samuel explained as he helped her back onto his horse. My friends will meet us there with supplies for the journey. They rode cross-country, avoiding the main roads, until they reached the crossing just as the sun began to set. True to Samuel's word, 3 cowboys waited with a fully loaded wagon and fresh horses. Well, if it ain't the runaway bride, called out the tallest of the men, grinning widely. Quite a stir you two caused back in town. Samuel laughed as he dismounted and helped Willow down. Willow, these are my partners Jake, Hank, and Tobias. They've been helping me work the claim these past months. Willow smiled gratefully at the men. Thank you for standing by Samuel. And for helping us today. Jake tipped his hat. Madam, when Sam told us he was going to storm a wedding to claim his bride, we wouldn't have missed it for all the gold in Arizona. Hank stepped forward with a bundle. Thought you might want something more practical for the journey, Miss Collins. My wife sent these clothes. Willow accepted the bundle gratefully. Her wedding dress, beautiful as it was hardly suitable for traveling. She changed behind the wagon while the men prepared for departure, emerging in a simple blue cotton dress and sturdy boots. You look beautiful, Samuel said when she returned, his eyes filled with admiration. You two better get moving, Tobias warned, scanning the horizon. Word in town is that Pennington's offering a reward for your capture. Samuel's expression hardened. He'll never touch her. They said their goodbyes to the cowboys, who would return to the mining claim to continue working while Samuel established their new home. Once the wagon was hitched to the fresh horses, Samuel helped Willow onto the seat beside him. Ready for our new life? He asked, taking her hand in his. More than ready, she replied, squeezing his fingers. As they drove away from Tucker's Crossing, the setting sun painted the desert landscape in hues of gold and crimson. Willow's heart felt lighter than it had in months, despite the uncertain future ahead. Whatever challenges awaited them, they would face them together. They traveled through the night, following little-used trails that Samuel had mapped during his time prospecting. By dawn, they had crossed into an adjacent county where Pennington's influence was less pervasive. We should reach Silver Creek by nightfall, Samuel told her as they stopped to water the horses at a small spring. The cabin isn't much to look at yet, but it's on good land with plenty of water. Willow stretched her tired muscles. As long as we're together, it will be perfect. Samuel pulled her into his arms. I still can't believe you're here with me. There were so many nights I lay awake worrying that I'd be too late, that you'd be forced to marry Pennington before I could return. She touched his face tenderly. I never stopped hoping you'd come back for me. Even this morning, as I stood in that church, something inside me whispered to wait, that you would find a way. Their moment of peace was interrupted by the distant sound of riders. Samuel tensed, immediately alert. Get in the wagon, he instructed, helping her up. Stay low. He grabbed his rifle from beneath the seat and positioned himself protectively in front of the vehicle. Minutes later, for riders appeared on the ridge above the spring. "That's not Pennington's men," Samuel said with relief as he recognized the riders. "It's the Marshall party. They're friendly." The riders approached cautiously, then relaxed when they recognized Samuel. "Blackburn," called the leader, a weathered man in his 50s. "Didn't expect to see you this far east." "Circumstances changed, Marshall," Samuel replied, lowering his rifle. "This is Miss Willow Collins, my fiancée." Marshall tipped his hat to Willow. "Madam, you two traveling alone?" Samuel nodded. "Heading to my new place at Silver Creek." Marshall dismounted and approached them, lowering his voice. "You might want to be careful." Passed some rough-looking characters about 10 miles back asking about a young couple, offering good money for information. Willow's heart sank. Pennington's men had already picked up their trail. "Much obliged for the warning," Samuel said gravely. "Any chance you could point them in the wrong direction if you cross paths again?" Marshall winked. "Already did. Told them I saw a couple heading toward Tucson. But you best take the High Canyon route to Silver Creek, just to be safe." After the Marshall party departed, Samuel and Willow continued their journey with renewed caution. The High Canyon route added hours to their travel, but the rocky terrain would make their tracks difficult to follow. As promised, they reached Silver Creek just as twilight was falling. The cabin stood in a small clearing surrounded by pine trees, with the creek bubbling nearby. It was indeed modest, just one room with a stone fireplace, but to Willow, it represented freedom. "What do you think?" Samuel asked anxiously as he helped her down from the wagon. Willow took in the rough-hewn logs, the small garden plot already planted with vegetables, and the wildflowers that grew along the path to the door. "It's perfect," she breathed. "Absolutely perfect." Relief flooded Samuel's face. "I was worried it might be too simple after the life you're used to." "The life I was used to was a cage," she replied, walking toward the cabin. "This is the first home I've ever had that was chosen out of love." Inside, Samuel had prepared as best he could for her arrival. A proper bed stood in one corner with a colorful quilt. Shelves lined one wall, already stocked with provisions. A small table with 2 chairs sat near the fireplace, and cooking utensils hung from hooks. "I know it needs a woman's touch," he said, suddenly shy. Willow turned to him with shining eyes. "It already has everything it needs, you and me." They spent that first evening settling in, unpacking the supplies from the wagon and planning their next steps. Willow insisted on cooking their first meal in their new home, preparing a simple but satisfying stew from the provisions they had brought. As they sat together at the small table, Samuel reached across and took her hand. "There's a preacher in Silver Creek settlement," he said. "I thought perhaps tomorrow we could ride in and make things official. Unless you want to wait for a proper wedding?" Willow squeezed his hand. "I don't need fancy dresses or elaborate ceremonies. I just need you, Samuel Blackburn." Their kiss sealed the decision, tender at first, then deepening with all the emotion they had suppressed during their months apart. When they finally broke apart, Samuel rested his forehead against hers. "I suppose I should make my bed by the fire tonight," he said reluctantly. Willow blushed but shook her head. "We'll be married tomorrow, and after everything we've been through to be together, I don't want to spend another night apart from you." Their first night together was a revelation of tenderness and passion, as they discovered each other fully for the first time. Afterward, Willow lay in Samuel's arms, listening to the night sounds through the open window, the creek's gentle murmur, the whispering pines, an owl calling in the distance. "I never knew happiness could feel like this," she whispered against his chest. Samuel kissed the top of her head. "This is just the beginning, my love. Just the beginning." The following morning, they rode into Silver Creek Settlement, a small but growing community that served the surrounding homesteads and ranches. The local preacher, a kind-faced man named Reverend Johnson, agreed to marry them immediately in his modest church. With 2 local shopkeepers as witnesses, Samuel and Willow exchanged vows, their voices clear and certain as they promised to love and cherish each other for all their days. The gold band Samuel placed on Willow's finger had been purchased months ago, he admitted, carried close to his heart while they were apart. As they walked out of the church as husband and wife, Willow noticed a rider galloping into town, raising dust in his wake. Her heart froze when she recognized one of Harold Pennington's men. "Samuel," she whispered urgently, "they've found us." Samuel followed her gaze and quickly ushered her toward their horses. "We need to get back to the cabin and gather what we can. We might have to move on sooner than I planned." They rode quickly, taking a circuitous route back to their cabin. Once there, Samuel immediately began packing essential supplies while Willow gathered their personal belongings. "Where will we go?" she asked, trying to keep the fear from her voice. "I have friends in Colorado," Samuel replied, strapping bedrolls to their saddles. "We can start fresh there until things cool down here." The sound of approaching horses made them both freeze. Samuel grabbed his rifle and moved to the window. "Stay inside," he instructed, his voice tense. But instead of Pennington's men, it was Jake, Hank, and Tobias who rode into the clearing, their horses lathered from hard riding. "Sam," Jake called urgently, "Pennington's put a bounty on your heads. 10 men left town this morning, hunting you too." Samuel opened the door and ushered his friends inside. "How did you find us?" "Followed the same route we discussed," Hank explained. "Figured you'd need warning." "We've been gathering our things to leave," Willow said, indicating their half-packed belongings. Tobias shook his head. "Running won't solve this. Pennington's pride is hurt. He'll keep coming after you." "What choice do we have?" Samuel demanded. "I won't risk Willow's safety." Jake and Hank exchanged meaningful glances. "Actually," Jake said slowly, "we might have a solution, but it's risky." As night fell, Willow stood nervously at the cabin window, watching for any sign of movement in the surrounding trees. The plan was dangerous, but if it worked, they would finally be free of Pennington's shadow. "They're coming," she whispered as lantern light flickered between the pines. Samuel squeezed her hand reassuringly. "Remember, stay hidden until I signal." She nodded and retreated to the root cellar beneath the cabin floor while Samuel took position by the window, rifle ready but unloaded, a crucial element of their plan. The cabin door burst open minutes later, and Harold Pennington himself strode in, flanked by his armed men. "Blackburn," he snarled, spotting Samuel by the window. "Where is she?" Samuel stood calmly, hands raised. "She's gone, Pennington. Left for California this morning." "Liar!" Pennington spat, his face contorted with rage. "My men saw 2 horses outside. The second belongs to my partner," Samuel replied evenly. "Check for yourself if you don't believe me." Pennington signaled to his men, who began searching the small cabin. Samuel held his breath, hoping they wouldn't discover the trapdoor to the root cellar, cleverly hidden beneath a rug. "Nothing, boss," one of the men reported after a thorough search. Pennington's eyes narrowed suspiciously. "She can't have gone far. We'll find her, and when we do—" "Actually, Mr. Pennington," came a new voice from the doorway, "I believe you'll be leaving these folks alone from now on." U.S. Marshal Williams stood in the doorway, flanked by 4 deputies and the Silver Creek sheriff. Behind them stood Jake, Hank, and Tobias, looking grimly satisfied. "This is a private matter, Marshal," Pennington blustered. "This man stole my bride." "Funny thing about that," the marshal drawled. "I've got sworn statements from half a dozen witnesses that Miss Collins went willingly. What I am concerned about, however, Are these warrants for your arrest on charges of fraud, intimidation, and attempted claim jumping? The color drained from Pennington's face. What are you talking about? Jake stepped forward, his expression hard. You've been trying to force small miners off their claims for years, Pennington. But this time you picked the wrong partners. I've been gathering evidence against you for the territorial governor's office for months. Samuel tapped on the floor, signaling Willow it was safe to emerge. The trapdoor opened, and she climbed out, immediately moving to Samuel's side. Pennington's face contorted with fury when he saw her. You'll regret this humiliation, both of you. The only regret here is that we didn't stop your operation sooner, the marshal replied, nodding to his deputies. Take him and his men into custody. The fight went out of Pennington as the deputies disarmed his men and placed them in handcuffs. As they led him from the cabin, he glared at Willow and Samuel with undisguised hatred. This isn't over, he threatened. Actually, it is, Samuel replied, his arm tight around Willow's waist. Your mining empire is about to collapse, Pennington. Those claims you stole will be returned to their rightful owners. After the marshal and his prisoners departed, Jake, Hank, and Tobias explained the full extent of their plan. They had been working with the marshal's office all along, using Samuel's claim as bait to gather evidence against Pennington's illegal operations. Why didn't you tell me? Samuel asked, both impressed and slightly hurt by the deception. Couldn't risk it, Jake explained. Needed your reactions to be genuine when Pennington came after you. But we never intended to let you face him alone. That night, after their friends had departed, Samuel and Willow sat on the porch of their cabin, watching the stars emerge in the vast Arizona sky. The danger had passed, and for the first time they could truly begin planning their future. What happens now? Willow asked, her head resting on Samuel's shoulder. Now we live the life we've dreamed of, he replied, kissing her forehead. I'll work the claim with the boys, build our ranch here, raise horses like we talked about. Willow smiled, thinking of the secret she had yet to share with him. And children? Would you want them soon? Samuel's eyes lit up. Nothing would make me happier than filling this home with children. Our children. She took his hand and placed it gently on her stomach. Then I have something wonderful to tell you, my love. His eyes widened in amazement. Are you certain? Willow nodded, her eyes shining with happy tears. I suspected before the wedding to Pennington, but I confirmed it with the doctor's wife in Silver Creek today. We're going to have a baby, Samuel. With a joyful whoop, Samuel lifted her into his arms and spun her around on the porch, his laughter echoing through the pines. When he set her down, his eyes were wet with emotion. I love you, Willow Blackburn, he whispered against her lips. More than I ever thought possible. And I love you, she replied, her heart so full it felt near to bursting. Thank you for riding into that church and claiming me as yours. As they sealed their happiness with a kiss, the first stars of evening winked above them, witnesses to a love that had overcome every obstacle. Their future stretched before them like the vast western sky filled with promise, adventure, and a lifetime of love. In the years that followed, the story of their dramatic wedding day became legend in the territory. People would tell of the brave cowboy who rode in at the last moment to claim his true love, of the corrupt businessman brought to justice, and of the young couple who built a thriving ranch and family from the ashes of what might have been a loveless marriage. And every year on their anniversary, Samuel would bring Willow wildflowers from the meadow, just as he had when they first met, reminding her that some loves are worth fighting for even if it means interrupting a wedding to claim the bride as your own.